entirely on the run, a fugitive to the king, bounty on his head, right? All the different things that somebody who is on the run from the law, which is what this is, even though the law in this case is wrong, he's on the run here, and that's what we're going to be seeing through all of these chapters. Now, have any of you all, and maybe not, maybe you have any of you all been victim of a hacker? Have you been hacked? Like your Facebook's, I figured. Facebook's have been hacked, right? Or social medias have been hacked in some way. Maybe somebody's got your bank information because you put it into a sketchy website and they've charged a bunch of stuff, or all those. We hear those things happening a lot. What part of your life was the hacker able to control? Well, you got your Facebook, he can pretty much do whatever's going on your Facebook, right? If you got your bank account, he can drain you pretty quick, right? Or whatever the case may have been. Sometimes we feel like our lives have been hacked, and that God is no longer in control. But of course, that's never really the case. God shows David through years, right? This is years this happens. These chapters take place of fearful circumstances, threatened to his life, all kinds of stuff going on. Probably felt pretty alone a bunch of time during this, that he never totally lost control of David's life, and David can humbly trust him even as he is on the run for his life. Okay, now let me ask you this question. How do diamonds become so beautiful? Does a diamond that comes out of the diamond mine, they're now synthetic diamonds they make in a lab, there's two different types, right? But a diamond that comes out of the diamond mine, is it like gorgeous as soon as they pull it out of the mine? It's not, right? What do they have to do to it? They got to cut it, got to polish it, right? A whole bunch of friction, right? Kind of grind it down, rub, the other excess carbon and dirt and stuff, and then it gets cut into the different types of cuts of diamonds, like princess cut, and it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head because that was the one that had this ring with. And other types of cuts, right, to make them a much more beautiful end product than what it was initially. In the same vein, how is a pearl formed? Like a real pearl, how is that formed? In an oyster shell, how does it happen?
Rolled around because of the irritation.
Friction, right? It gets rolled around in there, and all that friction in there eventually makes that nice, beautiful little pearl inside the oyster shell. Lots of friction happening here for David. Right? Lots of friction is going to take place, lots of trials. God is going to use the friction, use the trials, use the hard times to teach David to continue to trust in him as he kind of begins to shine as the true king here over Israel. So, 1 Samuel 21, all the way through chapter 28, as you can see. David's life as a fugitive from Saul. Now, the first 9 verses we're going to dive into here because he's going to start while being on the run, officially on the run, seeking some help here at Nob. Go ahead, Jeff. I think there should be a map that pops up. All right, leave it right there for a second. Okay. So this is the area here that David is going to be kind of moving around through. To kind of stay away. As you can see on the northern tier of this map, third city down, I guess technically, third city in red, down from the top, you've got Ramah, you've got Gibeah, and then you've got down to Nob. That's where he is going to become like the official fugitive here on the run from fleeing Saul's troops. Saul is determined to kill David, okay? Saul is determined to protect his kingly dynasty, his line, right, through being a royalty there in Israel. God has chosen David, of course we know, to replace Saul. So the determination of Saul killing David leads to this relentless pursuit through the city, or through the area here of Israel. So let's read the first 9 verses of chapter 21 of 1 Samuel. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the busyness whereabout I send thee, in what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth, woman have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessel of the young men are holy, and the bread is in manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. And David said unto Ahimelech, Is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, There is none like that. Give it to me. All right, so David's a fugitive now here in Israel. He's fleeing Saul. He heads first here to the land of Nob, or the city of Nob, where the tabernacle is currently located. Okay, so the tabernacle is currently located in the city of Nob, and this is where Ahimelech, who is the priest, serving as the priest, is there as well. Now, David shows up to the tabernacle, to where Ahimelech is, and obviously, he is totally by himself. No military escort, nobody around him as well, and this obviously was a very strange sight for Ahimelech, right? Because if we see his reaction in these first couple of verses, he is worried and concerned, and even maybe a little bit suspicious that David is there by himself. And that's why he's kind of asking him, hear about the king's business. Why are you here by yourself? Shouldn't you have people around you? So it's concerning to see David here by himself, which tells us that most of the time when David shows up in a city somewhere, or when David appears places throughout the land of Israel, he probably has what with him? Well, if it's strange for him to be by himself, then it means he probably usually has what? A bunch of people with him, right? Has a military escort with him. Because we know that David was a captain in the king's army, right? He was the guy. He was the one leading the armies to kill a bunch of people. And soldiers would be around him most of the time because he would have been in charge of those soldiers as well. Ahimelech was used to seeing him with probably quite the amount of people with him. So when David shows up by himself, it's a little suspicious. This is a weird thing. This is out of the ordinary for Ahimelech. This is unusual for him to see David by himself. David goes on here in these first 4 or 5 verses to try to explain and calm Ahimelech down by claiming here that he was on this secret mission for Saul. Right? Go to verse 2. And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and have appointed my servants to such and such a place. So David does what to Elimelech? It's okay, we can say what he did. What did he do to Elimelech? Told him a lie. Right? He told him a lie. Okay? deceiving him in some way to try to help calm him down. Okay? Was this the correct thing for David to do? David's a man after God's own heart. Is this the right thing for David to do? No. To lie to the priest? Is it ever okay to lie? No. Thank you. No, it's not, right? It's never okay to lie. Even David here, who's on the run, should not have lied. This shows a what in David's armor? Shows a little chink in it, right? It does. It's okay to say that. We're going to see a few more of these through times. We know David's kind of, a little special class. But we see here him not fully trusting God. That's what he's doing, okay? So he's coming up with this lie to Elimelech to explain to him why he's there by himself. Now, we know the way this story eventually ends, right? We're going to get to it eventually. But over in chapter 22, what does Saul show up and do to Elimelech? Does anybody know? What is it? Haley mouthed it. What is it, Haley? Kills him, right? Not just kills him, 85 priests are dead because of this meeting here in which he lied to Elimelech. That's the consequence of this. Over on chapter 22, we're close there. Let me see if I can find the exact verse. The 13 down to 22 is where it's at. But we see Saul. I thought I marked it. I didn't. Verse 17, the king stood unto the footmen that stood about. Here we go, verse 17, chapter 22. Turn and slay the priest of the Lord, because their hand is also with David, because they knew when he fled, and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priest of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, we're going to see him here in a second, turn thou, and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned and fell upon the priest, and slew on that day 85 persons that did wear a linen ephod. So eventually Saul's going to show up to Nob because he catches wind that David's been there. He's going to come to the tent tabernacle. And Elimelech's the kind of the head guy, and he's going to say, why did you help David? And Elimelech, what does he think that he has done? According to what just took place in chapter 21. What does Ahimelech think that he has done? Nothing, right? Because David has told him, well, I'm on the king's business. I need these things. And Elimelech's, well, sure. Take what I've got, right? Take the bread. Take this sword. So when Saul shows up, he is kind of blindsided with the fact that Saul's so mad about this. And because of this deception of David, it cost 85 lives here of this. Okay? Now, Jesus speaks approvingly of David eating the showbread that he takes here in chapter 21 over in Luke chapter 6. Now we know the showbread was used in the tabernacle as part of the ceremony, right? A part of the process of offering sacrifices and worship unto the Lord. The showbread was not supposed to be used like for anything but that, right? And we saw here that in this first couple of verses that David initially asked Elimelech just for something to eat, hoping to have something laying around. There's nothing there but the showbread. The showbread's considered holy, right, or very important, and he gets that given to him, which in the law of the Israelites, that's not something that should have happened, right? You shouldn't be able to take the showbread and eat it. But in this case, we actually see Jesus like specifically mentioning this taking place over in Luke chapter 6. So I want to go look at that. So let's flip over to Luke chapter 6. First 5 verses here of Luke chapter 6. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn, and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And certain of the Pharisees said unto them, why do ye that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? And Jesus answering them said, have ye not read so much as this, what David did when he himself was hungered, and they which were with him? How he went into the house of God, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone. And he said unto them that the Son of Man is the Lord also of the Sabbath. So David, or Jesus, mentions here over in the New Testament when he's arguing with the Pharisees for the umpteenth time, right? That certain regulations could be set aside if they resulted in a hardship instead of a blessing. David's obviously famished here, needs something to eat. So they set the regulation aside because it was going to be causing David a hardship instead of a blessing. So this is why the Lord mentions why this was an okay thing for him to do. What does David here, what does he show us about his faith in God by using deception here to provide for his needs? What does this show about David? Faith in God. It's okay to say bad things about David here. It's okay. I promise. What does it show?
Well, looking back from where we are, we see that it was okay for him to eat the bread.
Correct.
So it shows that he didn't trust that the Lord would provide the bread, and he had to lie about it, so it would be okay for him to have it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good explanation of this. It's kind of how I would have said the same thing. Obviously, it was going to be okay for him to go in and get the bread that he wasn't supposed to eat. God provided that for him through this moment of being there. But he didn't need to completely take matters into his own hands, right? God would have made sure that Elimelech probably would have just given this to him. If he would have just told him, right, hey, Saul's trying to kill me. I'm officially a fugitive. There's nobody else to help me. I've got nothing to eat, nothing to protect myself with. I'm sure Elimelech would have been, here's your shoulder, that's all I got, right? That would have been a fine thing, and probably wouldn't have ended up costing the life. Or Elimelech would have had he would have had something to do, right? But because he lied and said, hey, I'm on the king's business, nobody can know I'm here, right? Elimelech kind of fell into it. He kind of stuck Elimelech in a box, right, of how he could really help him. And we see he's not completely trusting God, does not need to take matters into his own hands. David just wanted a few loaves of bread, as we saw, but the only bread that was available was the day-old show bread that, of course, as we mentioned, was used in the tabernacle ritual. Elimelech gives him the bread. We also see him getting Goliath's sword. This is interesting. Okay, this is an interesting aspect of something that takes place here. Couple of things about Goliath's sword, right? Number one, why is it in the tabernacle? Why would it be there? I know it's a question that when I'm looking at this, when I'm studying this, it's like, why? Okay, how many swords were in Israel at this time? Probably. Well, more than Goliath's sword, right? Obviously, okay? Now, we know that for the most part, they had farmed out the making of weaponry to the Philistines, not by design, but they didn't have any blacksmiths. We saw that kind of taking place. So they were having to purchase those from other places instead of making their own, which is never a good thing. It's never good to outsource things like that, but that's what had happened because of their unfaithfulness to God. But specifically, there is the sword there of Goliath. Now, we have some parameters of what Goliath's sword looked like, right? Back over in chapter 17, when we talked about the fight from David and Goliath, we knew that Goliath's sword looked different than a normal sword. Obviously, it's going to be bigger, right? It's going to be heavier. It's going to be all these different things because it is the sword of Goliath. Now, so interesting that it's there in the tabernacle. Now, it could be there because obviously a big deal, right? Goliath's sword, having that there, shows that he is defeated. Maybe they're keeping it in the tabernacle to kind of show that's there on display, to show God's providence over Goliath, and kind of show a conquering moment that took place. More than likely that is the case, right? Probably is the case. That's why it is there. But it's wrapped up in a cloth. Obviously not on display. So that tells us that it's not just there for everybody to see, but it's there and it's hidden away. Now, could be there to keep it safe. Sure. Also a real possibility. But there are plenty of other places throughout Israel that they could have kept Goliath's sword safe. We also see David specifically saying there in verse number 9, how does he describe Goliath's sword? At the very end of it, what does he say?
None like it.
There's nothing else like this around. Right? There is nothing else like this around. Now, that could mean a multitude of things. Obviously, number one, we know there's nothing else like it because of what? How big it probably is. But if it's so big that Goliath was wielding it, and we know some of the specific parameters of it around, is it going to be pretty difficult for David to lug around? Yes. Absolutely, right? It's going to be a pretty difficult thing for him to just kind of have. So, are people going to recognize Goliath's sword that's strapped to David's back? Yes, absolutely it is. To go over and look again, I didn't write. You don't have it down specifically where it's at, but we know the weight of it is. So we have the weight of the sword, but we never get the spear, excuse me. We never really get the weight of the sword, do we? It just talks about the sword. I have to go back and look for sure specifically. Anyways, okay. So there are obviously something important about having Goliath's sword, that it's in the tabernacle, it's covered up with a cloth, it's kind of back in the back, and that David recognizes that there is nothing else like it. Now, you know how my brain works. Why is this so special, right? What's that makes this so special? And it has to be difficult for David, just from the surface value of this, very difficult thing for him to carry around, okay? Which there's a ton of Jewish tradition and, what's the word I'm looking for? We would call it folklore, right? What's folklore? Like things that maybe been embellished a little bit, right? Things that maybe kind of happened, but it's been fudged throughout the years. Has maybe a modicum of truth to it, but has some other things that have been entered into this as well. There is a whole host of Jewish folklore on why David was able and what Goliath's sword was for, from it having supernatural properties to it being able to have a certain type of technology to it, that it could change sizes by pushing a button, and all kinds of kind of wild things. Okay? Interesting. Really fun stuff to go. You get some time throughout the day to go in and look about what some of the Jewish folklore is about Goliath's sword. But I do think, right, it obviously had something, it had some great meaning, because it's a very specific thing that kind of shows up here in chapter 21 and it's written in. All right? Maybe the writer of this, when saying, as he was writing this, those people probably had a better understanding of what Goliath's sword meant, right, as he was writing this, than what we would have today. I.e., very similar to Moses in Genesis chapter 6, writing about the Nephilim, writing about the men of renown, and not giving us any more information about it, right? Because the people who were reading it at the time knew exactly what they were talking about. Very similar here, okay? And there's a real big rabbit hole you can take down about looking at giants and some of the stuff they were able to do. It's fun. But I wanted to mention it because it is kind of interesting that it's there. Because I do think it would be hard, as its surface value, for him just to kind of cart around. But that's what he got. So he got the showbread and got the sword of Goliath. Those was the only two things that Elimelech gave him. Verse 10, and David arose and fled that day of fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said unto him, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain 1,000, and David his 10,000s? Okay? So in the midst of all this, David showing up, getting the showbread and the sword. Elimelech was there with him. Obviously, somewhere in the background, we see in verse number 7 that there was a servant of Saul there as well. And this individual was named Doeg. And Doeg was the chief shepherd of Saul. And in verse 7 specifically, We see that he was described as being detained before the Lord, right? Verse 7, chapter 21. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belongs to Saul. So, Saul's chief shepherd Doeg, usually when somebody's detained, what does that mean? What does being detained mean?
Can't leave.
You can't leave. And why would you be somewhere that you couldn't leave? Why would you be detained somewhere where you couldn't leave? What would be the reasoning behind that?
Somebody decided to keep you.
Why would somebody decide to keep you there?
Crime or disease.
Crime or disease. Something was wrong, right? Something was up with Doeg. Either he had done something wrong or he had something physically that he was detained there for. We don't know that as of yet. Don't know, but it's interesting that we see him described in that way. Okay? Detained meaning he had to stay there against his will, right? He didn't want to stay there, but he had to stay there. Okay? Interesting fact. So he's there, he's detained, he witnesses from the curtains or wherever he's at, he witnesses this entire transaction take place of Ahimelech meeting with David and giving him these things. Fearful of being discovered by Saul, so Doeg was there, saw what happened, right? David tried to lie, thought he was doing a good job, but little did he know, Doeg was in the balcony or wherever, right? Looking and seeing this whole thing take place. So he gets this stuff, and fearful for Saul, we see David heading down to Nob, leaving Nob, and fleeing exactly or about 40 miles to the southwest to the city of Gath. So we can see Nob over here, the third city in the land of the Philistines and Philistia is Gath. And why is Gath famous? Or who was from Gath? Come on, guys. Who was from Gath? Goliath. Goliath was from Gath, okay? So Goliath of Gath was from Gath. So he goes to Gath to go get protection, right? Who knows why he went there? And just thinking about it, right? Or is Saul welcomed in Gath? No, right? He's not, right? This is the land of the Philistines, so it makes sense they would go there. This is a place that he can't go, right? So he shows up in Gath. Go ahead there, Chad. Bring up the next one. So while he is in Gath, we see him being a little bit deceptive again. So now David is starting this trend of trying to deceive people to save his own skin instead of completely fully trusting in the Lord. In Gath, he is going to feign or fake insanity. He's going crazy. So he seeks refuge here where King Achish is at. The servants obviously, like when David rolls up, he killed Goliath. Can David hide in Gath? No. He's the one person that can't hide in Gath because old boy killed Goliath, right? And also, he's got his sword on him, okay? And people are going, hey, I know that sword. The guy that was, I know what that is. It's going to look quite a bit different than everything else. I think it looks a whole lot different, personally. So they're going to recognize exactly who he is. And it's exactly how it works. Verse 11, and the servants of Achish said unto him, that's David. Is that not David? And they called him what? The king. So in Philistine, in Gath, in the land of Philistia, who is considered king in Israel? David. Who is actually king in Israel? Saul. Now we see why Saul will be so mad about stuff. Okay, because the enemy thinks King David's actually the king. And it goes on to say, did they not sing to one another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? Now that was a very specific thing that took place in Jerusalem. I remember. A very specific thing that took place when they came back from a battle in the city. Right, that's when they're singing the song. But apparently the word had spread, or there were people from Philistine in Israel as spies possible as well. But the word had spread here that they were singing this song and David wasn't king, right? Verse 12. And David laid up these words in his heart and was sore afraid of Achish the king of Gath. So he hears these things and he thinks, oh no, they're going to kill me because they think I'm king. That would be a great thing for them to parade me around dead, right? It would be a great victory for them. He thinks they're going to kill him. So verse 13, and he changed his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands and scrabbled on the doors of the gate and let the spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servant, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of madmen that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come to my house? So we see him acting insane before the king, right? Rab scrabbling on ribbon stuff, spit falling down, foaming at the mouth, doing crazy stuff, right? Acting like a crazy person to try to get out of what becomes a pretty quickly dangerous situation because they think he's king. Now, the passage doesn't really tell us here. We don't see that David was like right or wrong to act in this way. While he was before the Philistines. But if you look at the Psalms that kind of goes with this passage, the supplemental Psalms that goes with this, he writes pretty clearly that he was trusting in the Lord while being underneath the arrest of the Philistines. If you'll flip over to Psalms 56. And this is where we'll finish here. Over at Psalms 56. We consider they hide themselves, they mark my steps when they await for my soul. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings, put thou my tears into thy bottle, are they not in thy books? When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. In God will I praise his word, in the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust, I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. Thy vows are upon me, O God, I'll render praises unto thee. For thou hast delivered my soul from death, wilt thou not deliver my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living. So it appears here as David is writing this, right, this psalm, kind of in congruence to what is taking place while he's under arrest there in Philistia, that it looks like that, he's obviously acting in this way. He's acting like a crazy person and spitting around and scribbling and probably gibbering jabbering and taking whatever he's doing, but he's doing it still yet at maybe while still fully trusting in God. Now, while he was with Elimelech, no, he did not, right? And the reason that allows us to tend to believe this is that, as we'll get into this, eventually we don't see any harm coming from anything that happens while David's in the land of Philistines, right? We don't see any consequences of his actions. We see consequences of his actions with Elimelech when 85 priests get murdered because of it. Okay, and we'll kind of be able to kind of compare and contrast that as we kind of move through this here in a little bit. Click that one more time, Chad, so I can finish up. Stay right there. So through David's time in Gath, it was pretty frightening. His faith in God allows him to prevail and to live to see another day. And that's what we're going to look at more a little bit next week. David was learning that no one could stop God's plan from making him the next king in Israel. And more importantly, that nobody could stop God from sending Shiloh, right? That's what this whole prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this lesson, for this time. We can look in your word and being able to see your providence throughout the life of David while he is one sometimes being a little bit disobedient, also, Lord, seeing him be obedient, and how you have continued, Lord, to sustain him throughout some perilous times here, because nobody could thwart the plan that you have set forth for his life and for the life of your people. And we pray as we see in continued lessons and descriptions of your faithfulness to David, Lord, that we can lean on that as a fact, Lord, to know that the same God that protecting David here is the same God that wants a relationship with us, desires us, Lord, that you desire us, Lord, to serve you fully and completely as well. Lord, pray for Pastor Rob here as he comes and we have our next hour. Be attentive to your word this morning as well, in your honor, I pray. Amen.